Live pictures now back at Sandown, round 2 of the Shannons Nationals, and we've got the final race for the weekend for the Radical Australia Cup on screen for you. 50 minutes is the journey here. Kim Burke came home successfully this morning, led them away to Simon Haggerty, Tony Haggerty, Chris Perini, Rowan Ross back on track after damaging his car again today after a bit of damage, not as much damage as what he did at Tailem Bend. John Paul Drake and Brad Nilsson in there as well. We're only a couple of minutes or a minute and a half into this journey, so 50 minutes is the entire distance as they come down to complete their first lap. And it is Perini now coming up onto the number 6 of Tony Haggerty, and we'll stream on through. Won a race at Tailem Bend and looks to continue to do so, but got to get onto the back of Kim Burke before this race gets too old and stay with this year's front-running racer in the Radical Australia Cup. Tony Shebeki has joined me. And Tone, we get underway again for another 50-minute Radical journey. Yeah,
we certainly do, Daz. And she was one that a great journey earlier on in race number 1. There was a couple of really pivotal moments, especially for Kim Burke, who found himself sitting in third there at one place, but a couple of spins, one from John Paul Drake, and then a second spin to Simon Haggerty, who both at the time, I think actually John Paul Drake was second. Burke inherited second from that spin, and then Haggerty, who was in front, gave Burke the lead, and from that point on, Kim Burke went away with it. Having said that, though, Simon Haggerty was coming home pretty hard towards the end, and also a great battle for third place between John Paul Drake and Chris Perini played its way out as well, with John Paul Drake getting over the line by 2/100ths of a second in the end. So let's hope we see that sort of racing again here in race 2 of the weekend. 2 50-minute spells on the track for these cars. The Radical Australia Cup, and Kim Burke remains our leader.
They come down through that 1-2 link. Of course, we had the Custom Cars and Coffee Melbourne crew join us yesterday. That's those little signs just off the edge of the track there. And of course, BMW of Melbourne have joined us with the Shannons Nationals right throughout 2018. And we thank BMW Melbourne for the safety car that they're allowing us to use in this year's championships. Rowan Ross in front of John Paul Drake. This will go on this battle. We've seen some strong battles right throughout this year as Perini, in fact that's Brad Nilsson in the back of shot there as well. They stream around the left-hander and plunge down into Dandenong Road. As we've just seen Chelsea Angelo joined Richard Craill for the Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge race, and she whacked the wall down there. And she hasn't been the only one. We've seen a few give the wall a whack down there. Rowan Ross, who's currently sitting 5th in this race, put his Radical in down there. Not anywhere near as hard as what Chelsea landed down there. And as Chelsea said, it's done some damage there, and the Wall Racing crew have got a bit of a task ahead of them to get that car back up and running. But great to hear from Chelsea Angelo, a great career in open wheelers, and now finding her way into the Porsche Michelin GT3 Cup Challenge. Kim Burke already setting himself up a handy 4-second lead. He's going to have to, because Kim Burke has got a standard 75 seconds plus 15 seconds in the pit, so it's a fair old pit stop that he has to endure during this race.
And seemed to really play against him initially in the last race, in the first race that we had this morning. It did bring him out back in third place after leading the race. As we said, those couple of misfortunes to John Paul Drake and Simon Haggerty allowed Burke to take the lead. But had they not have spun, Burke may have had trouble passing, who knows. So that extra 15 seconds, 90 seconds in total, is a massive difference for Kim Burke.
Yeah, and look, we sort of joke about it and say it's a bit of a rest in the middle of a race. In fact, it's actually a little bit more challenging than that, because you get used to it, you get in the groove, and then all of a sudden you've got to come into the pits and really have a break from it from a moment, and it takes you the best part of a lap again to get back up to pace. And it's only those that are doing a lot of racing, continuing doing the Radical Australia Cup right throughout the year, that be able to switch it back on as quick as you possibly can. And that's a vital skill that anyone in motor racing, regardless of whether it's in the Radical Australia Cup or in the prototypes or in Porsches, whatever it may be, to command that kind of skill. These guys are all pretty much amateur races, gentlemen races. Of course, James Winslow was going to be teaming up with John Paul Drake, but John Paul Drake has decided that the penalty that he was going to have to endure was outweighed by the skill and ability that James Winslow was going to bring to the table. So it'll be interesting to see how John Paul Drake can go. Certainly having plenty of racing, just coming out of the prototype race in his Wolf, then jumping into the Radical, a bit of a different weapon, still the low-slung prototype type sort of race car, but you know, doing lots of laps will certainly put him in good stead.
Fantastic to see James Winslow back in a car as well. We saw him a couple of weeks ago down at Tailem Bend, but a horrific crash for James last year, Daz.
Yeah, we never like to see anything like that happen to anyone. That was at the Abu Dhabi 24-hour race as well, and you know, an LMP3 car, and they're a pretty safe piece of kit. They're fast, but they hit the water at an awkward angle and did a bit of a back injury. So he's still on the return. You know, in fact, he might have been a little bit sore today after going so quick. But certainly no doubting the fact that he's still got the hands and feet that you need to go racing with. Simon Haggerty now out after Kim Burke, and Chris Perini out after the two of them as well. So this actually could be a very, very interesting race with the way that they manage the pit stops, the success equalisation formula. And again, the compulsory pit stop window opens at 15 minutes after the race commences. So we're only 7 minutes into this race so far. There's still another 8 minutes till they can start doing compulsory pit stops.
Got to give congratulations to John Paul Drake as well, who effectively just finished the prototype podium, finished second outright there, and as soon as he received his trophy, put it back down on the podium and ran into his car.
What a great way to go racing for the weekend. I can't think of anything better. If you're going to come to the track,
yeah,
have one exit every second race. Have one lined up, ready to jump from one to the other. Oh, what have I got now? Oh, it's this steering wheel. Hopefully each car's the same number. I think it is. I think it's 66. Yeah, I think the prototype is the same number as the Radical.
Can't mistake the car though. He wouldn't have jumped into anyone else's car, I can tell you that. John Paul Drake with some multicolour happening. At the front though is Kim Burke, Rowan Ross back there with Brad Nielsen, currently in 6th and 7th respectively. John Paul Drake in 5th, and then Tony Haggerty, Chris Perini, Simon Haggerty, and Kim Burke on screen now, our leader, by 4.5 seconds from Simon Haggerty. Having said that though, Simon Haggerty's just put in a faster Sector 1, not too far off the time for Sector 2, and Kim Burke has posted a faster Sector 3, so between the two of them, they are getting some decent times up on the track at 1:14.32, the fastest time at the moment. 7 laps in, 40 minutes remain. Kim Burke, our leader.
The final race, which was the second race last year here at Sandown, Peter Padden beat home Kim Burke, and it was quite a substantial race win by about 16 seconds over the 30 laps that they got completed. They got 39 laps completed this morning, so there was safety cars involved in that race last year. And he beat home Kim Burke, and then it was Dave Crampton who came home in 3rd, Tony Haggerty in 4th, Michael Whiting and James Winslow. So James Winslow was in last year's race.
Yeah.
Michael Whiting raced in his home round in South Australia last round, but not this round. Ollie Smith had a bit of a tough run. He came 2nd in the first race, but he came 6th place in their final race for the weekend last year at this event.
This is the 3rd round of the Radical Australia Cup for 2018. And what a calendar they do have from here on in as well. The cars heading down to Phillip Island in a couple of weeks' time as they remain on the Shannons Nationals calendar. From there off to Sydney Motorsport Park, and the 6th round to come and be confirmed shortly. The great news though is, that we mentioned this before, Daz, is that Kim Burke, who currently leads the championship, should he remain in that position after the 6 rounds, finds himself winning an amazing prize and an opportunity to race overseas.
Yeah, pretty cool prize off the Monza.
Yeah.
A bit of a drive over there and probably go and see a bit of Italy.
Well,
have some pizza and pasta and get into the Tuscan wine region.
Yeah.
Head out to the Cinque Terre, have a look at the view out over the Mediterranean. Whiz off down to Capri.
Some of Valentino Rossi's family, maybe.
Probably. Visit the Ferrari factory, the Lambo factory, Ducati, Alfa. What else?
So much
Lake
to do.
Como. Get out there. Have a ripping time. Do the Italian Odyssey. Beautiful part of the world.
Become a gladiator for a day.
Yep. Yeah. Into Rome.
Yeah.
Go and visit the Vatican.
Go see my family.
Drink some gold on the
Go
Vatican.
see my family in Lipari.
Yep. We should do that one day, Tone.
You and me, yeah, we should.
Yeah. Get the families out and
I'll let my wife know.
Trip.
That doesn't.
I'll let mine know. I think she's actually watching the streaming. Happy Mother's Day to all the mums out there. That's my wife, of course. My mum is away this weekend with Dad. They're enjoying a bit of a break.
I've said to my wife though that I don't celebrate Mother's Day with her because she's not my mum.
The wife, yeah, exactly.
But if she doesn't give me a Father's Day present, look out.
Yes. Yes. Well, they're the rules in the Shebeki house, aren't they? You rule with an iron fist down there, Tone.
Kim Burke remains our leader.
He's ruling with an iron fist.
He certainly has all weekend, hasn't he?
Stamping his authority across this field. This is a good look straight into the eyes of Rowan Ross. Tall bloke, Rowan. A really tall bloke, a good bloke as well. He's got a master driver grading, drives in the RA Motorsports team, and he is driving one of the new SR3 RSXs this weekend, and they are a very serious piece of racing kit. You need to speak to Radical Australia to get yourself one of these in the shed, and if you don't want to get it in your own shed, they'll look after absolutely everything for you.
At Sydney Motorsport Park, the home of Radical Australia.
House them there. I believe they're looking for a home here in Melbourne as well. Talking to different people, seem to think they're trying to set up a strong Melbourne base. We know John Morris was involved in that a year or two ago. But the new SR3 RSX is the latest iteration on the magnificent Radical Australia Cup car. And the rules of engagement, as Radical Australia call them, you can be an amateur, a driver who competes in the series as a hobby or a pastime, or a pro, a driver who earns an income as a race driver or instructor, or have competed at a professional level, or are paid to compete in a championship. Prior CAMS National or Radical Australia champion may also be classified as a pro. A professional driver can only share a car with an amateur driver in endurance events, whilst 2 amateurs or a single amateur can drive the car in these Radical Australia Cup
Should
races.
also mention the grid determination for both races as well. The starting positions for race 1 set by the qualifying order. The starting position for this race, race 2, was actually set by the second fastest qualifying lap time. So for Kim Burke, it was a fairly solid qualifying day.
I'm going to delay my move into the Radical Australia Cup for the next 12 years for then I can get into the Radical Masters aspect. 12 or 13 years away from me.
What, 58 years, 50 years of age? Settle down. I could drive in it tomorrow.
Well, the Radical Master is a driver of 50 years of age.
Yeah.
I'm 13 years off that.
51 next month.
6'3" too. Well, when I lined up at Collingwood, I was.
Well, you've been squeezed fairly severely.
They told me I was. Collingwood 6 footer, they said I was. Just engage a couple of inches above that. So the point structure, first place is 40 points, second place 35, P3 30, P4 27, so on and so forth, down through the field.
Should also mention that 2 set of complete Dunlop tyres allocated to each team per round. And we should also congratulate Radical Australia on their charity work and their charity partner being Young Care Australia, whose mission is to help young people exit and avoid admissions to aged care right now. They also aim to develop viable and replicable models to solve the problem once and for all, giving young people with high care needs the choice in care and accommodation that they deserve. If you want to learn more about the Radical Australia charity partner, all you need to do is go to the website www.youngcare.com.au, and what a fantastic cause that is. Too often we see young people aged 20 or 30 years old having to be put into an aged care home just due to the fact that there are no facilities available for long-term care outside the hospital.
Certainly Motorsport is used as a great vehicle to growing awareness to a lot of these different sorts of charities. The charitable partners are certainly quite popular these days with Motorsport, and of course the Shannons Nationals partnered up with the Kids for Cancer organisation a few years ago as well.
Canteen.
Helped out with that.
Kim Burke back on screen, doing a great job at the moment. 5 and a bit second lead ahead of Simon Haggerty, who has a 5 and a bit second lead ahead of Chris Perini in third place. John Paul Drake in fourth, Tony Haggerty in fifth place, Ryan Ross and Brad Nielsen down in seventh place. These cars have already been atop Mount Panorama. What a fantastic sight that is to see these radical cars scooting around the streets of Bathurst and Mount Panorama, and then of course made their way down to the inaugural race meeting at Tailem Bend just a few weeks ago.
If you're in the paddock area at Mount Panorama with these cars on track, you can't even see them going up Mountain straight. They're below the below the guardrail level up there. But I tell you what, if you get up to McPhillamy Park and sort of the exit to where the big control tower is at the top of Bathurst there, just watch them appear at Reed Park, drop down into McPhillamy and down across the top of Skyline and wend their way down to Forest Elbow. They're absolutely rapid, absolutely on rails through there, and watching some of the pro ranked drivers. Race leader in now into the pits.
CPS window, so the compulsory pit stop window has opened, and straight away Kim Burke comes in to serve his 27-minute penalty or whatever it is. 90 seconds, I think, for Kim Burke, 75 seconds and 15 seconds as well. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 now, all bar Tony Haggerty and Ryan Ross into the pits. Those guys trying to make up a little bit of time and position on the track before they get the opportunity to do the same. So Burke, Simon Haggerty, Perini, Drake and Nielsen all in. Tony Haggerty stays on the track and goes to the top of the timesheets. John Paul Drake makes his way out of pit lane. He'll slot in behind Ryan Ross, who has remained on the track. Coming out now, Brendan Nielsen. So Burke, Haggerty, Perini still in the lane. I reckon that we might have had a driver change. I reckon Mitch Nielsen would probably step in to the 38.
Just keeping an eye very closely on the dashboard, watching that 40km/h speed limit that is engaged for pit lane.
Patience.
The RA Motorsports crew working on many of the cars. Of course, you can bring your own crew along or employ your own crew, but the RA Motorsports people are happy to provide all of the support you need. And I would suggest that that is Brad Nielsen disrobing with his helmet there as well, and Mitch heading out on a track now. We've got
Perini's just driven out.
Simon Haggerty out, Kim Burke, who was in the lead of this race, and Perini heading out as well. So more than 3/4 of the field in one fell swoop have done their pit stops. Looking down the pit lane there, there's plenty of GT crews getting themselves ready. The Trofeo Motorsport outfit working hard on getting that Huracan Lamborghini up to pace for Jim Manolis. Let's tell the story as it is. Tony Haggerty hasn't been in for his compulsory pit stop
and
yet.
is praying like hell that a safety car comes out.
Or it rains.
Or it rains.
Something like that, yeah. Yep. So he's out in front, but only by that margin we see on screen over his son. Now this is the race proper. Car 5 versus car 68.
Which is what we saw in race 1. Simon Haggerty ahead of Kim Burke, John Paul Drake. They were our top 3. Tell you what though, really impressed with Brad Nielsen at the moment, down in 7th place, but a 1:13.76 is the fastest lap by half a second as Tony Haggerty does make his way into the pit lane.
So Brad Nielsen and Mitch Nielsen share this car, and last year's Rookie of the Year. Now we see Tony Haggerty in. He's gesticulating to the RA Motorsport crew, and There's Mitch Nielsen in the background, back of picture there in the grey overalls.
So that would mean that Brad has stayed in the car.
For the rest,
yeah.
25 minutes left to go. Sort of half and half, those guys work it out. Kim Burke now charging hard at Simon Haggerty. But Simon Haggerty's got the answer. In fact, at the moment, the best lap time between them is really only, it's a 1/10 of a second. And Simon Haggerty's now doing the fastest second sector over the track for the whole entire race on this lap. So responding to what Kim Burke is doing. They hardly fly under the radar with these liveries, though, don't they? If you have a look in the mirror, it's a blur of colour.
Yep.
I think the Nielsens have probably got it right with that grey colour. You sort of blend into the
Great to
track
commentate,
surface.
though, with cars like that colour. At least you know who's who.
Pretty significant, aren't they? Yeah.
Now, this is interesting. Tony Haggerty starting to make his way out. Simon Haggerty and Kim Burke go past. Let's see where Tony Haggerty comes out in the order. Well, he's going to come out at the back.
Yeah, John Paul Drake and Chris Perini go through there as well. He'll come out in front of Rowan Ross and Mitch Nielsen. So Mitch Nielsen is at the wheel. Well, so says our timing screen. Simon Haggerty leading the way, 1.6 back to Kim Burke, plus 6.3 to John Paul Drake, and then Chris Perini a further 7 seconds back. Keep an eye on this 1.6 from Simon Haggerty to Kim Burke, though. Still with 23 minutes to go, that gap is decreasing. Rowan Ross still hanging in there, though. Got Nielsen right up behind. So this is battle for 6th and 7th and last in the race. And it's on like any other battle in the race, isn't it?
On like Donkey Kong.
That's it. Kids, you did grow up in the 80s, you won't know what that is. Look that up on your search engine.
Yeah. With a bit of Super Mario Brothers.
Really, really high-tech video game.
This is high-tech racing right here with Mitch Nielsen and Rowan Ross. Every bit of pressure being applied by Nielsen at the back. This will be interesting to see what he can do at this point. We're a little bit wide on his run into the main straight. Has kept a close enough distance, though. I think Rowan Ross may just have a little bit of an advantage down the straight, and as a result, Mitch Nielsen won't be able to make a move at the end of the straight into turn one.
Well, see, if this was Barbagallo, you'd be able to go round the back of that ripple strip and come racing back down the hill there.
Good opportunity there for Mitch Nielsen. Looked up the inside. Rowan Ross shut that down pretty quickly as they set themselves up again for a run up the back straight. What can Mitch Nielsen do this time around?
Hang in there, I'd say. Rowan Ross has got a fair bit underneath. They're both in different iterations of the SR3. So Rowan Ross is in the newer RSX, and the Nielsen car is the older RS. So the 88 car there, the blue and white one, is the newer aero package, newer engine package, the Evolution 3 engine package versus the Evolution 2 in the number 38. No great horsepower gain, just some better serviceability of the newer engine. And when I say that, a few more Ks out of it between tear downs.
So we don't see the SR8 here, Daz. We used to in the earlier days, where we mentioned that Carl Reindler has set the fastest lap.
We had seen the SR8 racing in the Australian Prototype Series, and it's doing quite well in the Australian Prototype Series. But the Radical Australia Cup is internationally now only for SR3s, and the eligibility is, of course, right down through the range of SR3s ever since they first started making them. And there's numerous eligible RS SR3s. I mean, the first ever SR3, the Radical SR3 RS, the Radical SR3 RSX, and the Radical SR3 RSX Cup car, which is the 2018 variation of it. And each time it's kind of like Porsche. It's an evolution of what was really good before, just being improved ever so slightly for longevity, and just to get a little bit more out of the package, because they're out and out race cars. They're highly stressed sports cars, purpose built, all the right safety gear. So with any purpose-built, highly stressed race car, it becomes a fairly strong regime of maintenance and serviceability. Components have to be lifed, and when I say that, I mean X amount of kilometres or hours of racing before the component has to come off, be crack tested or binned completely, replaced with a new unit. So all of those things are strictly adhered to with the Radical Australia Cup and the SR3s. Across those 4 different generations of cars that we see. The original Radical SR3, we don't see any currently racing, although they're eligible. We don't see any currently racing in the RAC. We do see a couple racing in the prototypes with Phil Hughes' car, one in particular that stands out, which is the very early iteration on the Radical SR3. So what we've got currently running are the 2 next generations, the RS and the RSX. There's no RSX Cup cars yet running here, but they are eligible to do so.
So 19 minutes remaining on the clock. Second 50-minute race for the day. And Simon Haggerty continues to lead this one, as he did in race number 1, until a small mistake just spun that back end out for him and gave Kim Burke the lead and the race win in the end. He'll be hoping like hell that it doesn't happen again this time round.
So Kim Burke now, in the last 3 laps, has pulled the gap back to 0.9 of a second, so he's halved the gap. Now what he's got to watch out for is this duo here, the dynamic duo of Batman and Robin. I mean, John Paul Drake and Chris Perini.
Which one's Batman out of those 2?
I think you're Batman. Didn't we discuss this at Tail and Bend?
Did we?
Yeah, I think we may have. I was going to be Boy Wonder. Probably because I'm 13 years away being eligible for Radical Masters.
And I'm already there. Yeah. So that makes me Alfred, probably.
So I think it's probably going to be John Paul Drake. It'll be Boy Wonder.
Well, Chris Perini's the rookie, isn't he?
Yes.
The novice, so he'd have to be.
Yep, there you go.
The younger.
We've decided, haven't we? The 66 and the 81. We digress. This battle is pretty serious for 3rd and 4th. In fact, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 are having their own separate battles. And they're not that far apart each other on the track. In fact, it's only 7 seconds between that duo in front and the duo coming 3rd and 4th.
It's an absolute replica of race 1, isn't it?
Yes.
In regards to what we're seeing here, where 1 and 2 are battling it out and 3 and 4 battling it out. 17 minutes to go.
Beautiful racetrack here in the suburbs of Melbourne. For those of us that live in Melbourne, love to come to Sandown. It's always an easy journey in.
It certainly is. And I'll tell you what a great bloke John Stephenson is. I've got to know him a fair bit through my work there with the Porsche Security Carrera Cup category. And just a lovely, lovely bloke, and learning so much about the sport that he's only been involved in for the last couple of years. Great to see him here and just perusing what's happening out there. Cam McConville's had a fair bit to do with his driver training over the last 18 months or so. And, just really getting into motor racing.
I think from a personal level, I enjoy seeing the likes of John Stephenson get involved in motorsport, because he adds to the story of motorsport that a lot of people don't understand. And we touched on this a fair bit yesterday with fitness and race drivers. And it's pretty easy. John Stephenson actually said himself, you know, the landscape comes at you at over 200 kilometres an hour.
Tell John Stephenson this isn't a sport.
Yeah.
And see what he's got to say about
correct.
it.
Yeah, work it out from there. See the look on his face. You know, he said that the landscape comes at you at over 200 kilometres an hour. That's a sport. You've got to have your concentration. You've got to have your fitness there. If you're not fit, you lose concentration and you end up joining that landscape at 200 kilometres an hour plus. That's not funny. No one walks away from that. No. You've got to be fit.
Correct. You certainly do. And these guys are too. 50 minutes out on the Sandown track takes a fair bit out of you.
And this is the critical part of the race for your fitness.
Yes, exactly.
Because at this stage, your mind starts to wander because you might be getting a bit thirsty. You might have had a bit too much to drink before the race, and you might have a bit of an issue that you might need to relieve yourself. Wouldn't be one of the first time a race driver sat in a bucket of water for the last 10 laps. That's for sure.
And I'll tell you what, this is also a position that Chris Perini finds himself in behind John Paul Drake. He found himself in this exact same position in race number 1 and just could not find a way past him. Coming towards the end as we have a spinner, and that is Mitch Nielsen making his way sideways.
It's exiting turn 4, I think, there. That's a fair way past the corner to have gone around like that. I think probably come off the back of the ripple strip and gone around in an anti-clockwise fashion, but possibly spun right around. Just surmising, didn't quite get a good feel for where that was, but I'm tipping the yellow flags being waved down at turn 4 are giving us a good indication of that.
And then the exit of 100 metres down the road is green flag again, so just local yellow for Mitch Nielsen as he gets it.
Oh, that
was
put
Chris Perini's
charge on John Paul Drake a fair way back.
So there's John Paul Drake. Where is Chris Perini? There he is now. So that gap is marginally larger than half a second compared to what it was only a few hundred metres ago.
It's marginally half a second under 10 now.
Yeah. That is a real shame because that battle had been exactly the same battle as it was in race 1. And I was just about to ask you the question. Do you think Chris Perini learnt anything from race 1 about how he might be able to handle this time round? We won't get to know.
I'm going to say go and have a word to John Steffensen, get a bit of a fitness program and don't lose concentration in the last 10 minutes of the race.
Well, if that was the case.
Bit of fatigue maybe.
Don't know what Simon Haggerty though, going along nicely. With Kim Burke pretty much owning the weekend so far. It'll be great to see another name up the top.
Yeah, this will be really cool to see Simon Haggerty here. He's still got over 11 minutes to go. And in fact, Simon Haggerty has arrested that charge at him and he's now moved the gap out to 1.12 seconds. So it was down to 0.8. So he's now gathered himself up 0.3 of a second. And let me tell you, every 0.1 of a second is very, very important when you've got pretty much the same bit of gear that the guy in front of you has. Slow moving car there, which is Nielsen.
Yeah. And
here comes the race leaders. Let's hope he stays right out of this battle. Gets through the corner before they arrive, stays to the left. Nice work there as our race leaders come through. Certainly we've seen people going slowly before weighing into the result of a race. Well, Kim Burke now has answered the call again, got this gap back now well and truly to half a second. So in the last lap and a half, he's dragged 0.8 of a second out of Simon Haggerty. We're 8 minutes left to go.
Answering the call is one thing, passing is the other. And we found that out in race 1, didn't we?
Yep.
Where Perini on Drake had the issues. And having said that, the gap now from Chris Perini to John Paul Drake, he did this in the last race as well, Perini. 6 seconds is the gap now. Was out to 11 after Perini had that spin just before turn 4. So this will be interesting to see whether Chris Perini can continue his charge home and actually get right up the back of John Paul Drake again with 1 or 2 laps remaining.
Something I've just noticed with Kim Burke over the last couple of corners is he's using a whole lot less track than what Simon Haggerty is. And when I say that, he's exiting corners and keeping it on the black stuff, let's say. He's not getting up on ripple strips, whereas Simon Haggerty's starting to use ripple strips as well. So maybe Kim Burke's got a better set of tyres under there. He hasn't been pushing the car as hard, or he's just rested the car a little bit at the moment. So we see right up on the ripple strip with Simon Haggerty, Kim Burke just brushing across them. We'll try and get a good look at that as they exit turn 1 as well. The turn 1's a real teller as to what you've still got under you tyre-wise. Coming down here, Simon Haggerty leading the race, has done it for about 15 laps now, so he's been strong. Heads out, keeps it off the ripple strip, but Kim Burke doesn't even go over the yellow line there, so he's definitely been able to put the car right where he needs to, not covering off quite as much real estate. We're watching Simon Haggerty just bobbling off the ripple strips everywhere he goes. Again, off that turn 4 ripple strip. So Kim Burke's driving the car a lot straighter. He's not using as much car as he possibly can, as much as Simon Haggerty has used. So that tells the story at this late stage in the weekend.
And while you were watching that on the television, Daz, I was watching the battle between John Paul Drake and Chris Perini coming down the main straight. And Perini is definitely making an inroad into the gap. It's now down from 6 seconds to 4.7 in just half a lap with 6 minutes remaining. Chris Perini, I would hopefully predict, will be back on the back of John Paul Drake and give us a good battle for third and fourth again, with hopefully a lap or two to go.
Off that gain that you've just described there, Shebex, in the best part of 2 laps he will. There's at least 3 more laps in this race. So has he got the same thing going on with Kim Burke? Kim Burke's got the car in the corners, but Simon Haggerty's getting the car nicely up the straights, and that's the important bit here at Sandown. It actually is 68% of the lap is in the straight line. So if you can tune the thing to go fast in a straight line, you've got half the battle done and dusted. You've then got to get it across the top of the hill at Dandenong Road and then try and make it work through these 90-degree corners. Left, right, left at this early part of the lap, turns 1, 2 and 3.
There's that gap now between Drake and Perini, just on 4 seconds between these two. With 5 minutes to go, we would say maybe 3, possibly 4 laps remaining. And at the last marker, it's down to 3.7. So Chris Perini on the charge to try and get the final podium place. Simon Haggerty will actually, at the moment, if these points remain the same, Simon Haggerty will take out the round with 76 points. Kim Burke on 75.
Kim Burke retains the lead in the title hunt, that's for sure. In fact, he increases his lead in the title hunt here this weekend.
And that's the important thing for Perini as well, is the fact that he's currently second outright in that championship, and he doesn't want Kim Burke to be going too far ahead of him, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, and I guess Kim Burke at this point looks at it and goes, wow, the net gain is 1 point in the championship. Simon Haggerty appears to have, he's got the game on a string at the moment. He's been in the lead of this race for over 15 laps now. And Kim Burke, what's their gain? 1 point. Well, at the end of the season, there's 1 point in it. There's a net gain. Exactly. But at the moment, he's just able to ease that gap out again. And it's happened again. It's out to a 1.1 seconds and has gone through quite easily.
Did Chris Perini find a fresh set of greens, because he has just posted the fastest lap of the race on that last lap of 1:13.45. He is absolutely pounding down to 2.6 seconds now, the gap between Perini and Drake. And back out front, that gap remains at just over a second between Simon Haggerty in the white car and Kim Burke in the multicoloured car.
Now, I don't want to be a hard taskmaster or anything here, Tone, but if I was down in Chris Perini's pits and at lap 35 he did his fastest lap, I'd be asking, why haven't you been doing that since lap 20? If you're able to punch out a fast, no, they had hot tyres 4 laps into it. If you're able to punch out that lap time at lap 35, why haven't you been doing it for the last 15 laps?
It's a fair question.
That's the question that you get asked as a race driver when you come back into the pit lane.
That's the question.
Well, the planets weren't aligned. I needed the moon to be over there and the sun to be just right here. I needed Aquarius to be on top of Leo, or whatever it might be. That sort of thing. Who knows?
As long as it's got nothing to do with Uranus.
And environmental conditions said I could do it on lap 35. I bet that won't make a speed cut, Tony. But John Paul Drake now can see that Chris Perini wants a piece of this action out in front. 2 minutes and 20 seconds left to go.
1.2 seconds, that gap now, you can see it. He is right up the back and firing home with 2 minutes 10. There'll be this lap and possibly, I reckon they might get 2 more in, because the leaders aren't that far in front of them. It'd be hard, but there's at least 1 more lap to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Chris Perini to make up the difference. And at the same point, 1 more lap for Kim Burke to make up the difference with Simon Haggerty.
I don't reckon Kim Burke's got it in him.
No, I don't think he has either.
He's been driving the car really well. He's keeping it nice and straight, and he's not hurting the car in any way, shape or form. But I think he's got to get that gap. It's now just over 1 second. He's got to get that down to under half a second before he can make a lunge at him. And then he's got to make that lunge stick.
Correct. So Chris Perini now just a second behind John Paul Drake. He has brought that down from 7 seconds to 1 second in the space of 5 laps.
Gee, where do you look? At this time in a 50-minute race, where do you look? Do you look at the battle for 1 and 2, or do you look at the battle for 3 and 4?
Well, I reckon the battle for 1 and 2's over. And I say that with confidence as they start to make their way to the top of the final straight. And Simon Haggerty will bring it home ahead of Kim Burke.
They go again.
But at the back, it's still Chris Perini. There's our winner, Simon Haggerty. Kim Burke crosses the line now.
Don't think they've got the checkered flag, Tone.
No, they've still got a lap to go. There you go.
Still going. Still going. So we'll see another lap. There goes Drake and Perini across the line now. So that is a strong, strong battle, and it's been raging as it has been at the front throughout the last 15 laps. Kim Burke's got toed and froed. In fact, Simon Haggerty has turned it up now because the gap is 1.7 seconds. That's the most it's been for the last, I'm going to say, about 11 laps or so.
You would say Simon Haggerty has this one pretty much in the bag.
Now he's driving it neat and straight too. He's keeping it off the ripple strips.
Down to 0.4 of a second now, that battle for third and fourth between John Paul Drake and Chris Perini. It is an absolute belter of a finish for those two cars.
Onto the straight for the final time this weekend. The Radical Australia Cup race 2 for the weekend goes to Simon Haggerty. Kim Burke will bring it home a very close second. He was closer 4 or 5 laps ago. In fact, he was 0.6 off the lead, and he comes home in second place by 1.3. Here comes third place. It'll be John Paul Drake that leads home Chris Perini, who left his charge right up to the exit of the final corner. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. Simon Haggerty, Kim Burke, John Paul Drake and Chris Perini greet the checkered flag. A race, I guess, in 2, Tone, there with the 1 and 2 with Haggerty and Burke, and then the 3 and 4 on the road with Drake and Perini. And a battle to the end there as we see Rowan Ross has come to the line. Mitch Nielsen has come to the line there as well. Rowan Ross and Tony Haggerty still to complete their final lap. So Mitch Nielsen will come in 7th. Tony Haggerty will come in 6th. And Rowan Ross will come home there in the number 88. So let's confirm for you. The Radical Australia Cup, race 2, Simon Haggerty in his older SR3 RS by 1.3 seconds over Kim Burke in the new RSX. John Paul Drake in the older RS, 17 seconds back and half a second back. From that is Chris Perini in the newer RSX. Rowan Ross in his RXO in 5th and 6th place. Tony Haggerty, Mitchell Nielsen rounding out the contenders for race 2 of the Radical Australia Cup.